Okay, we'll call the committee of the whole meeting for November 8th to order at 12:30 p.m. Ask for a motion from Councillor Barton that the committee of the whole adopt the agenda for the committee of the whole meeting November 8th as presented.
Mayor Snodgrass would make a motion.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Adoption of minutes. Just one. Ask for a motion from Councillor Jones that the committee of the whole adopt the minutes from the September 27th. How do we do this? Who gets to vote on this? Only those?
All do.
All do? Okay.
Mayor Snodgrass, yeah.
Thank you. As for a motion from Councillor Jones, the committee of the whole adopt the minutes from the September 27, 2021 committee of the whole meeting as presented.
I will give you that motion, Mayor Snodgrass.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. And over to you, Gennady.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for seeing me here today. The reason I'm here is there has been a development proposed for residential development. This is an addition, one single detached dwelling and an additional dwelling unit on the same lot. It is in an infill area, and we have recently introduced the infill variance policy. And there have been 3 variances requested with this proposed development, which is why I'm bringing it to you here for consultation. If you haven't had a chance to review, I can definitely go through the 3 variances which are proposed, but if you have, I can just take your comments if you have any on the variances which are proposed. But to quickly summarize them, there is a variance to the primary residence, primary building for the front setback, a variance to the accessory building for which is a carriage house and a garage, and also a variance to the frontage build out.
Okay, thanks, Gennady. So just to give new councillors a little bit of background, this kind of stuff used to not come back to council for our input. But what we found is in these older neighborhoods of areas of town that when variances on housing development came into play, we would always hear about it if one of the neighbors didn't like it. So rather than being behind it, we decided to get in front of it so that planning staff would bring us any development plans that had variance requests attached to them. So that's why you're seeing this here. Now, when I look at this one, this is over by the entrance to Rio Vista Golf Course, and it's a weird shaped lot, as you can obviously see. And the setbacks, there's nothing in here that concerns me at all because there's nothing that really affects any of the neighbors. I think it's actually a pretty cool way of them trying to retain the existing mature trees that are there. And this is why a big portion of why they want these variance requests. So I think it's great myself. So no concerns on this end. Anybody else? Councillor, I got Kinghorn first and then to Jenny.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Question, is this not the street? Is there like 2 or 3 of these along that same street as well already? Can you confirm that for me, please? Of a similar design with the garage out front and the house around back?
There's definitely one that's what, 2-3 doors down to the north or to the south. Sorry. There's one that's very similar to this. Yeah. This is just setbacks from the trees is really what it is.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Snodgrass.
Councillor Jones.
I had a couple of things. One is, I think the address on here is incorrect. I think it's supposed to be southeast, not northeast.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the design, it does say southeast on some of the design layouts. And I went and looked at it. I went for a walk And there is another house, yeah, a couple doors down, I would say that's kind of similar. It's in, at first I was concerned about the area has a lot of houses that are kind of mobile home-ish looking. And so I was concerned that it would stick out, but it's actually in a corner that I don't think it would be an issue. And like I said, a couple doors down, there's a house very similar in design, I believe. So I had no issues with it, but I did think the address is incorrect.
Is that north or south Gennady? The north of.
Right. Yeah, so thank you, Councillor Jones, for that comment. I believe it is northeast. All of our parcel mapping do refer to it as northeast, and that's what we have been referring to it in the past. I know there have been some confusion from applicants. Most of the time we have received it as southeast, but definitely something we can make sure we get right so that there is no confusion down the road.
Yeah, just have a look at it, Gennady, because if you look at the map on drawing A2,
yeah,
the street is actually listed as 2nd Street Southeast. It's just the red port, main residence and the carriage house that states it is northeast. Maybe there's other areas, but
they're actually
north
north
good, yeah.
of, they're north of center, so it would be northeast.
okay.
Okay. Yeah, so this is just a change we can ask the applicant to make. The comments are due tomorrow, so can we just find the comments?
Oh yeah, the surveys got it as northeast. So okay, minor issue. You guys figure it out. Anything else, Jenny?
No, I had just tried Google mapping it first, which is why I noticed the address did not come up as such.
And that's a good point, because on the mobile homes are all they kind of start on the east side of that road and go into that Riley Park area, right? Any other questions? I got nobody. Good to go, Gennady. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you, everybody.
One resolution that we need to do is when we cancel the committee of the whole meetings in October. I'll ask for a motion from Councillor Kinghorn that committee of the whole formally acknowledge that the meeting on October 12th was canceled in accordance with council's procedure bylaw.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I will give you that motion.
Yeah, all in favor? Okay. Curling and small ice surface slab. Riley.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I'll start off by introducing our new manager of Parks and Rec. She's been with us for a little bit now, but between COVID and no in-person council meetings and a trip to the Olympics, we've kind of missed. So I'd like to introduce Nancy, our new manager of Parks and Rec.
Oh, Nancy.
We can barely see you, Nancy, for the light behind you, for the sun behind you, but.
Well, thank you. Yes, it's quite bright in my office and I love it, so.
So moving on to the presentation, I'm going to run through the history fairly quick. There is quite a bit and it is quite involved. So if you have questions as I go, feel free to stop me. When we get to the options, I will stop and bring up some PowerPoint just so we can see the options or the layout as we discuss them. And then I'll go back to some report. And with that, I guess I'll just jump right into it. So this kind of starts off well, I guess it goes back further than that. We've had issues with the curling slab for some time now in terms of settlements and cracks. Our other slabs have that as well. Just it wasn't to the same degree. In May 2020, we had a full evaluation done on all three, which confirmed that they were end of life. They gave us some cost estimates and some suggestions in terms of moving forward. From that, shortly thereafter, the municipal stimulus program was announced, and we determined that this project was a good fit for that. So council, we took that to council. Council approved us submitting the application on September 14th, 2020. And subsequently, we were approved for the grant. Following that, we tendered out for an architect, which was awarded to GW and JBB. It was a single contract. It was a partnership. From here on in, I'll probably just shorten it up to just GW. So they did all the design work on the replacement. After they did the geotech, they identified an issue with the soils. We had frozen material upwards of 8 feet, which means we couldn't put a slab directly back on top, nor could we excavate the ice and build it back up. When you're that deep, there are limits in terms of depth before you can no longer build on top without time for consolidation. So the concern was once you go over a certain amount, you're going to get consolidation, which would impact the slab. So between the ice, well, mainly because of the ice, it was determined that a structural slab was needed. After which we went to council, discussed the geotechnical issue with the ice, and then increased the budget. Because we were already concerned about timelines at that point with meeting the grant, which was the end of this year, 2021, the project was split into 2 components at that time, demolition and as well as construction. So demo was tendered out while we finalized the design and added all the new structural components, which was awarded to Respite. To date, that contract is complete and there were no significant issues with the work done. The RFP for construction closed, which had a couple issues. The 2 biggest being it was over budget, as well as it didn't meet our timelines for the MSP grant. We took that back to council, had a conversation around what do we do with the bid, what are our options, what's our best way forward, and it was decided to pause the project. We couldn't meet the timeline for the grant at that point anyway, so pause the project and take another look at the geotech. So following that meeting, we redid our geotechnical work without the constraints of the grant in mind. The material had mostly melted or completely melted at that point. We redid our structural analysis, and at that point we determined that the ice is gone and we can move forward with the project without piling. And that's what's going to be priced out and presented as I work through this. Of note is that at this point the scope had changed significantly, and we're currently GW and the town agreed to mutually end the contract as the scope was no longer applicable. I think that's important to note because that means we have no current contractual obligations. It also means we don't have an architect on board if we were to when we restart the project, and some consideration will have to be given to that, either in terms of how we procure moving forward or in terms of project delivery. So just touching on the new geotech a little bit, it did identify some issues with the loading of the walls. So we're exceeding bearing capacity of some of the soils. The soils in question, so at the rec center, we have a granular base, kind of like pit run, covered by a silty layer. And so the walls that punch through or were excavated out to have the footing sitting on the gravel layer are fine. Where we're seeing some concern is where they're sitting on the silt. They did take a look at the structure a couple times and did further analysis on the geotech. And the thought was, since there's been no significant movement, there's no evidence of any significant movement in the walls. The slabs definitely had some, but not the walls. That no further work with regards to the walls is required. And the recommendation was when we do the slab, we would excavate down to the granular layer and build up from there to make sure we have a good base for the slab. which doesn't move in the future. In terms of the freezing, I think it's important to note that the freezing shouldn't be an issue in the future. So underneath a refrigerated slab is a heat mat. Ours at one point in time wasn't running, which led to the accumulation of ice. The new slab would include a new heat mat that would be functional and would not cause any future ice buildup. I'll pause there. I think that's the history of how we got here. And so before I jump into options and layouts, is there any questions on that? It's quite a bit to digest.
Brenda?
The deterioration of the heat mat underneath, did that contribute to the fault of the slab? And if so, is that something that's included in a maintenance proposal going forward so we don't see the breakdown of it that way?
Anecdotally, we were seeing actually not anecdotally, we had some work done after the flood, and we know there were settlements then. And from the curling club, we've heard that this has been an ongoing issue for some time. So, and that was long before the heat mat wasn't running. It's a 40-year-old slab. So it served us well. I think we've got our money out of it. We're seeing issues beyond the settlement as well. So I think it was a year ago when we started up the large arena as an example, we had a number of leaks along the header. What was happening is the pipes running through the slab are getting brittle and they had split where they met the header. So we're going to continue to run into operational issues like that on the large arena. The small and the curling have been removed, so it'll be all new, so we shouldn't run into issues from that regard. From a maintenance perspective, there were a lot of issues cropping up. We had to do a partial replacement on the header a couple of years ago as well. Again, it had rusted out, just end of life. So it served us well.
Thank you.
A little bit of history too. Like this has been an issue with that curling floor for at least 25 years. The curling club has been asking the town to do something about it for quite some time, but didn't get done. Then the flood hit, so it got shelved. Of course, so this is just one of the things that's been on our list to finally get dealt with. And then when the government came out with we got the $1.7 million grant from the COVID infrastructure funding. So we decided now's the time to do it for the best bang for our buck with the amount of money that the town would actually have to put into this. So that's why we're doing it. But because the two surfaces are tied together with the chiller, you do one, you got to do both with small ice and the curling club. So that's why it's, everybody's talking that it's $2.3 million for the curling club, but it's not. It's between the small ice surface that hockey uses and then on the curling end. So I don't have any other questions, Riley, so you can continue on.
I will flip up some PowerPoint and I'll get rid of it as soon as I'm done. Can everyone see that okay? Yep, I got thumbs up, so I'll move on. So option one, I get a consistent, so I guess some basis for all the options. You'll see two costs at the top. One is the construction cost to put this back. The next one is capital costs. So we've looked in terms of what our capital has in the next couple of years and potentially what that could cost us. So I can go into more detail later. It's in the report in terms of we have an ice plant upgrade that's required. We have a roof replacement that was put on hold pending this conversation. We have the cladding on the building should be upgraded. From an energy efficiency perspective, we should be looking at low E ceilings. And I think those were for the four in the immediate future. And so the capital cost is essentially what those are. So if we're comparing this to an all new option, the the intent was all new wouldn't have immediate capital costs. So to compare a remedial or renovation to an all new option, you need to understand both those costs. So in this case, the construction cost to do this option would be an estimated 2.4 million. And then our capital costs are an estimated 1.8 million on top of that. Not shown in these costs is our costs to date. So between expenses and what's committed, essentially outstanding invoices and a little bit of project management, we have committed roughly 570,000 to date. And that's not included in any of the numbers you will see because that's already spent and committed. What we're looking at is just numbers going forward for construction. These are estimates, and I'm going to big caveat around that. These are range of magnitude kind of numbers. We're basing them on square footage. They are carrying contingency within, as well as design fees within. Until we get more into design, we don't know how those pan out. We hope they're close. That doesn't always work out. For example, the tender that came in last time was significantly over budget. We had a single bid that was largely, it was definitely inflated from where it should be, and market conditions also pushed it up. And so just a caveat around what these numbers are and how we arrive at them. With that said, this is option one. Essentially, we put back what's existing. The differences here is we're considering fixing some of the Zamboni storage off the small ice. There are two pipes here, a water and a sewer, that might prevent this. And as we get into the other options, we'll talk about that a bit more because it does impact if a pool expansion was to go ahead or some of these other options that look at larger footprints. What we've also included is accessibility ramps. So right now, these surfaces are only accessible by stairs. And so we are looking at an accessibility ramp for both. This does impact the viewing area for curling quite a bit. So we may have to look at that in terms of, do we just build one and do a passageway or something like that? These are by no means set in stone drawings. These are concepts we came up with based off the conversation with council that we could use for costing. So we'll still have more opportunity to adjust these options as we move forward. For this one, we're looking at a 7 to 13 month timeline, depending on how we procure and should we run into any hiccups. We're also dependent on, people bidding and getting competitive bids. The slabs themselves, installing the slabs themselves is not a big job on its own. And so putting back as was should be fairly straightforward. Given that we have completed the demo, ideally we have taken most of these surprises out. So I'll go a bit quicker through the other options. That's kind of the basis of how we came to some of these numbers and outlines. Yes, Kelly.
Can we do a couple of questions here?
Sure.
Before you move on past this one? Go ahead, Kelly.
So my question, I just want to clarify. So that 2.4, is that including the capital cost of 1.8 or is that over and above?
Over and above. You have to add the two. I have a slide at the very end where I list them all with them added up for you.
Okay, thank you.
So Riley, what's the difference? Put back existing. Like, I don't understand. Put back existing is a $2.4 million project, but then you've got capital costs 1.8 million. What's the 1.8 million for?
The 1.8 million is future capital. So the ice plant needs an upgrade because the chiller is end of life and some pumps are end of life. So those are future capital costs. Well, very near future capital costs we're going to incur that
Regardless
are not part of the
whether
project.
we do, yeah, regardless, right?
Well, it doesn't factor into all the options. You'll see. Let me get through the options.
Okay.
It'll make more sense when I get through them. Any other questions? No. Worth a mention. This was a big conversation point when we first talked about this with council in terms of what are the standards for curling. So the standard curling length is, there's actually a range, which surprised me, is 144 to 150 feet. The width 14.2. Our old sheets had the right width, but were short, 2 feet short. So we could still do some tournaments, but it does restrict our ability to have some of the bigger tournaments. It surprised me how flexible curling is with the standards. So even us being too short, although it's not ideal and it will limit us, it's not the end of the world for playing the sport, as an example. We are lacking clearance spaces. So ideally you should have 6 feet front and back, as well as a walkway. And so that's missing as well. Putting back existing, we get existing back. It's not ideal, but it gets us back into the building quicker. So given that that was a big conversation point with the curling club themselves, I thought it worth recapping. Option 2, I won't spend a lot of time on this. This is essentially option 1, but we put, instead of a leisure ice, we put in a dry space. We're seeing increased demand on our field house for dry land space. And there's been, I mean, a climbing wall idea has been kicking around for a while. So that was something that had been discussed. Option 3, now we start playing with extending the building. So our trusses on all the buildings run north-south. So that allows us to extend the building to the west. And so this would be an extension to get the length for curling. This 100% requires us to move the water and sewer pipe that are just outside the building on the west side. So somewhere in here, which adds costs. We'll have to, depending on where we end up with the pool, we don't want to end up moving those lines twice. So depending on that, we may want to push them out even further, or figure out what we actually want to do with that. This allows for more tournaments, but we are still missing the walk around space. So there is no side walk space. As a bonus, we did tack on, since we're already moving those lines, tack on some storage on the end here, potentially for Parks. Parks has 2 sea cans out here, which are something we've been trying to reduce throughout town, whether it's by the town or by businesses or through construction. They're not the most attractive things in the world, and this gives us an option to address some of that. Option 4, we start getting into the expensive options. So this is basically demoing everything that was in that space. And then rebuilding from scratch, purpose-built spaces. So this is now, instead of a leisure ice, it's 3-on-3 ice. We now have proper spacing for curling on, so the clearance, so we have a 150-foot sheet with the clearance front and back, as well as enough room to walk around the sheets. But it does start getting very costly. There's no capital costs on this one, because no longer do you need the roof. You would have to completely redo the ice plant anyway. It would have all new cladding. So this is where you see those capital costs drop off. The it does get, in terms of schedule, you start pushing schedule a ways out, because now this is a significant design process. We'll have to factor in something for consultation in terms of what does this look like, and go from there. So, I mean, we're looking at 16 to 27 months. Our cost has jumped up to over 13 million. This still does not consider any of the nice haves that curling's brought up, like a lounge upgrade. So that's still not factored in terms of renovation of existing space in the existing building. This is purely for this brand new footprint. It also includes the cost of moving those pipes. And then lastly, same idea, full demo, but what would it look like if we put in an NHL rink rather than leisure and curling? A little bit more money, there's a little bit bigger footprint, which kind of makes sense. But I don't think that's, from what we're hearing, that's probably not what we're looking at this point. And then lastly, cost comparison. So just to make it easy, a single table in terms of these three options need the capital cost. So option 1 through 3 need those. What does that total look like? And then these are the newer options. You'll notice in option 6 here. Option 6 is what does it cost to build a new facility on a new site? This also does not include land purchase. It does not include servicing, and it does not include any work that would still be required at the existing facility. Because even if we build a new facility, we'll need to do something with the existing space, even if it is just complete the demo and pave it or whatnot, or put in dry land space or a leisure surface or something like that. So that's the options. I'll pause there before I finish off, stop sharing and finishing off the presentation. Yes, Councillor Kinghorn.
Thank you, Riley. Well done. Can you go back one term you brought up, which I wasn't familiar with, the 3-on-3 ice? I believe it was option, yeah,
4.
that one. Does that mean that the ice surface size has changed?
Correct. So there is a, I'm on a branch here. There is a recognized 3-on-3 size. It's not spec'd to a standard like an NHL rink.
Okay.
But there is kind of a recognized size, which is what this is. So it is a different size than what the current leisure ice is. Nancy, do you want to correct me on that?
You are correct. It's a sport standard that we would adhere to in that option.
But not a recognized international standard, correct?
Correct.
So slightly bigger than what it is today.
I think it's wider.
Correct.
Not necessarily longer.
A little wider. Okay.
A little wider.
Would the plan to be to use the existing dressing rooms then, like up the stairs and around the corner and down the hall where the dressing rooms are, or was there any thought to what that would be?
It would be reusing the existing dressing rooms, and you're right, that would be not desirable.
I didn't say that. I just said, is that
I assumed you were going there because we do get complaints because those change rooms are small.
Well, thank you, Riley. You've answered my questions.
You could extend, you could put a larger footprint, but then you're increasing costs again. And how much do you value having those change rooms bigger? Councillor Barton.
Yeah. Hey, Riley. So I like that we're going through all these different options and coming up with different possibilities. I think that's great. One of the questions I have, I think right up front is what options would give us the most return, right? So for example, let's say we went with option 4, or if we went with option 5 even, or whatever it was, and what are we going to get on return? Are we going to get, do we have options to have summer hockey? Because I know there's a need for ice in Southern Alberta. I'm involved with the Foothills Minor Hockey Association, so I know the amount of ice that is needed. It's crazy. So I'm wondering if we put any of that thought into that. And then I think the other thing too is 2 other points is it doesn't upgrading the lounge, whatever option we go, I think that is a good option that we should start looking at long term, whether it's blowing a hole in the back side of the curling rink and having the ability to have a lounge that goes to whatever ice it is, whether it's curling or to the other one. That's becoming something that's common on a lot of ice rinks. And then I think the big problem, even if we went through option 1 through 4, I think it was, we're going to have a problem with the dressing rooms. I mean, that's been a huge problem for a long time. So I don't think that's a secret.
No, it was an option when I played in those. There was a problem when I played in those dressing rooms, and that was a long time ago. We've since built the ones for the large arena, which took some pressure off that. But yes, it's definitely still an issue. In terms of value, there's been a number of conversations. Nothing's quantified in terms of that. It would be hard to quantify because some of the uses is, if you're going strictly from a cost recovery perspective, or are you going, there's definitely social benefit or community benefit in terms of providing these services. Because if you're looking at a purely user perspective, you probably look at a very different option. And what would that be? But we do try and offer a range of sports. Some of them are not as well used as others. And so whether there's that, I don't know how I'd quantify that, to be honest. And we've struggled with that internally in terms of what's a cost benefit, what's a community benefit, how do those outweigh each other? Do we look at purely from a user perspective, but then sports that don't have high usership, curling is an example, would not rate highly. And how do you do that?
Yeah.
I mean, you could get into community surveys, and we've done a little bit of that historically, and see where the need is. And we could do more of that, I guess, in terms of really, for example, I'm jumping around, I'm sorry. The long and short of it is, no, we haven't. We've had conversations, but we don't have numbers or report or documentation that would back that up. We've done a little bit of work when we do our master studies in terms of what do we see as community needs, and where would we see benefits. So we do have some of that, but some of this is emergent too. I mean, how many pickleball's been around? What, less 5 years? And it's dominating our facility right now. Within the last couple months, basketball's all of a sudden become a really big thing, and is taking huge bookings from us right now. But you still don't want to lose space for some of those other sports like volleyball and whatnot. So we do have drop-in volleyball that comes by, and you don't want to take away their time just because they're not high users or whatnot. So, and how do we promote more users? And that, again, that's kind of around rate recovery. How important is that to council? Is more users and the benefit that gives the community important, or is the rate recovery? And there's definitely a balance with that. We've actually seen our ice bookings taper off. We have less ice bookings than we used to. And so why is that? Is that because everyone just wants prime time? Off time on ice time, is there, and that's actually something Nancy's been looking at with the rates in terms of discounting off our ice more to try and encourage more usership. It's there, we're paying for the refrigeration anyway. How can we get better use out of that?
Okay, I'm going to jump in, Riley. We just got to get back on.
Sorry, I went down a bit of a rabbit hole. I'm sorry.
I know when you get talking recreation, we can be here for a while because it's too much. I'll go to Brenda.
I appreciate that, Craig. You just said the engineer knows too much about recreation. I really appreciate that. 2 years ago, you couldn't have said that.
No, I probably wouldn't have. Yeah, you're into it now. Go ahead, Brenda.
My question is, in as far as like a happy medium, we just went through the whole referendum with the pool and people stressing their interest and need in recreational facilities. So to fall on the lower options where we simply rebuild the existing, is there a happy medium, in your opinion, Riley, as you've put all these reports together? Is there a happy medium that would give us a little bit of more more of an option to diversify and increase our regional attraction. And particularly in the winter months, winter sports are unfortunately the majority of our time here. We don't have a whole lot of outdoor summer things. So has any of this been directed to drawing more people to use it from our surrounding communities? And is that enough to support building on option 4 or 5? Does that make sense?
Yes, but I don't know if I can answer it.
Okay.
So
That's
we
okay.
haven't done a lot of look in that regard. There has been a priority or a focus put on getting this project moving and dealing the issues with the space. In terms of a larger conversation, what does rec look like within the town? We could go back to the master plan and take a look at that and see where that impacts what we're doing or what the needs were from a region. But at this point, the focus on has been largely on the space, kind of like Jamie's question in terms of, you know, what's the, I guess to summarize it, what's the best bang for buck here in terms of moving this forward? And so that's not something we've had a look at specific to what goes in this space.
Thank you. I totally understand let's get this on, let's get the curling rink up and going, but my hesitance is to build the same as what we have. If we'll just have what we always had, we don't then meet the needs of the future, is my thought. But thank you for
that. Definitely, that is a risk. I mean, if you put back what's existing, you know, right off the bat, you're limiting yourself in terms of tournaments that could be held there. From the small ice perspective, the usage has been limited to essentially Timbits and a little bit of practice for figure skating, a little bit of old timer hockey, but it hasn't had great usage historically. Could that be addressed through programming and through rates? Maybe. Could there be a better use for that space? Like if you said, okay, we're going to go full on leisure ice and promote it as such and treat it as such, would you get better usage? I don't know. Okotoks has had a huge amount of success with their leisure ice. Are we big enough to support something like that? Or do you go dry land? We are, like, you look at our pickleball numbers, you look at the recent increase in basketball, would dry land be more appropriate? From a usage perspective, from a cost perspective, maybe, but it would take some time to drill down and go through that.
And I'll just chime in here to answer Councillor Walsh's question a bit. I think when we talk about return on investment for recreation, it's always difficult to quantify. I think that's been clear through the conversation here. And if that becomes the crux of the argument about whether we add value to it, then it's a much larger conversation. Recreation has to be looked at as an asset to provide value to our existing community members and what our community members want to see. Certainly with the curling rink being here, the curling club wants to be back in that facility sooner rather than later, right? And we do have this opportunity. Hopefully we get the grant extension, which looks positive till the end of 2022, that allow us to take advantage of the $1.7 million. So when we have those opportunities, but be careful with the concept of recreation being, looking at expanding recreation services for return on investment. Right now, we subsidize recreation to the tune of almost $3.5 million a year for general taxation, that kind of ballpark. So I think that's something to be very cognizant of, that we do subsidize it dramatically to make sure that our residents are getting the uses that they want within the recreation facility. And we are seeing some uptick, but it's still never going to be anywhere close to a break-even process or break-even level with a public facility like this. So I just wanted to kind of jump in and make those kind of comments right now. So we do have an opportunity with the 1.7. We do have an opportunity to redefine what this space actually is. We also have the risk of losing users as well if we make the wrong choice. And I don't know what I can't honestly tell you what the right or wrong choice actually is to provide you that advice. What we do know is from the input from the curling club, they want to get back curling. They want to get back using that facility. And what that looks like in the future, not sure. Hope that helps.
Kelly?
I just like to further to that, like there's a lot of folks that have taken their curling interest on the road because they're not able to use our facility here. And so I think it's also been a detriment to the vibrancy of the curling club to not be able to have a facility that they can use. I mean, last year it was COVID that shut everything down. And this year, of course, it's the facility itself. So I do think that there is a cost to the community that way from a social perspective, as well as an economic one if we're not able to host these types of events. So I think that we need to be mindful in whatever choice we make going forward, that if we're looking to expand or to increase our capacity for usage, what's that look like? And how do you, it's a kind of a hard to quantify because there's no measurable, but at the same time, I think we just need to be mindful of whatever decision we do make. Does it have that opportunity for some growth down the road, or, what's that going to look like?
Jamie?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess for me, this is a challenge for this council and especially the new council members, in that we haven't had a really good hard look at what our financial position is right now. Obviously, we don't have $5 million or $4 million. I guess it'd be about 3.8 that we spend on this, sitting around in the bank account to just spend on a facility like this. I wonder where the money's going to come from, Riley. Can you, are we going to have to go into debt again, borrow? Where's our threshold on this? Maybe Chris could answer that better.
Yeah, so Councillor Kinghorn, I can jump in and answer that question. So the funding aspect of things would be if we can take advantage of the grant to the 1.7. And the rest of the funding for returning the slab, I'm not going to talk about the roof, the additional capital cost for replacing the roof or the exterior cladding or the low-E ceiling. That's all stuff that's planned in the future. And the rest would come from our CRIF, our Community Reinvestment Fund, which we have approximately, I think I sent out the reserve balances this morning to you guys. I think we have about $8 million within that fund. The other piece to this too is we do have a substantial healthy surplus when it comes to municipal sustainability initiative, which this project, actually, no, we can't use MSI on this project because we have the MSP grant. So we can't use that. So we'd have to use the CRIF funding from that. If we lost the MSP grant, the municipal stimulus program, then we could use MSI to do this replacement. But because we can't double book provincial grants, so to speak. Does that answer your question, Councillor Kinghorn? But we have the funding. We have the funding available.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got packages from 2.3 right through to 16.5. We certainly don't have 16.5. I don't believe we have 13.3.
Yeah.
3, okay.
And Councillor Kinghorn, I'm talking about option 1, replace the existing.
Option 1? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so when we first started this, none of these other options were in play. This is all this come about because we've had so much time to think about this. That's where they're coming from. And our agreement with the curling club when we said we were going to do this was to replace the floor. There wasn't any of this, going to make it wider, we're going to make it nice, blah, do all these other bells and whistles. It was just to replace the existing floor. That's what needed to happen. We've got to keep in mind that the curling club in High River, membership wise, they hover around, I don't know, I think it's about 280 to 325. I think 20 years ago it was maybe 350 when I was on the board there. But we're not talking about a lot of people, but we are talking about an enormous amount of money. And you get into $16 million, I'm not there. I can't do it. I'm all for option 1, to the point that I don't need to, how bad do we need the Zaboni Zamboni storage. Where's it going today? So, like, why we're adding things just because we're doing something? I get real hesitant to just start adding things on as wants instead of something that's actually needed. I've got an issue with doing that because that's why this number has gone from 2.3 million to over whatever, 16, 19 million dollars. I don't have your spreadsheet again, but as far as I'm concerned, as far as return goes, Jamie, it's recreation. There is no financial return. It's a subsidized thing. I don't care where you are. It just, the user fees, you cannot charge user fees that make these things profitable. It's just, it just doesn't exist. And as far as this summer ice that you're talking about, I've heard that as well. But is it small ice that they would use? Like, can they use, they can't, they want big ice, right?
Well, they want, it depends. There's a number of different options there. Yeah, just because
it's mostly they want arena ice though, right? Is what they're looking at, right? So
in Calgary right now, I can comment on a couple things. There's the ice actually, they're actually getting more for the ice during the summer than they are in the winter. And it's fully booked, right? So that's all I'm just saying. It's just an option.
But still not enough that it makes it a profitable venture. The recreation facilities. I don't get it. Hang on, Jamie. One at a time here. Recreation facilities, the return on them is they have to exist in your community. They just do. You just have to do it. You have to provide these services, but they are all subsidized. So I'm still on option one, Riley, where we started and what we agreed to do. That's where I'm at. But the dry land thing, I don't know. We got a massive field house there too. And I know it's successful and everything, but we've got a big dry land portion. But that one I might be able to be swayed on, but
the small ice, and Nancy, you might be able to confirm this, but prior to this, prior to COVID and everything, that small ice was used every night. It was booked every night by BB, Bow Valley. They'd been a long user for a long time. So it was booked and it was generating money anyways. Like I said, it's not the same as a full return on investment, but there was a return anyways. And I think we either go, this is just my opinion, we either go option one or we got to go look at option 4 or 5, something like that, because I know it's not feasible right now, but we need to be able to communicate that to the community in a clear and effective way and say, listen, this is where we're stuck right at the moment. And yeah, if we just return it back to normal, then it is what it is. And we just keep working with it. And we got to realize that at some point, I'll be honest with you, I'm a curler and I think curling needs to be moved out of there. I worked on a plan years ago to actually try and move it out of there, out to the rodeo grounds. So, I mean, there's an option as well. Rodeo grounds or even the golf course. Curling's not.
You and I both worked on those, Jamie, but what we found out is that curling participation is going down. Yeah. Like if we do one of those other projects, you're into the,
well, no, but here's
right. So we got to get back on top. We got to get back on top. I'm not talking about the rodeo grounds and the golf course for the curling club right now. We got to figure out what we're doing with this project. In my mind, it comes down to the small ice. Do you want it to be hockey? Do you want it to be ice, or do you want it to be dry land? The number is virtually the same, right? So, it's 2.4 or 2.2, whatever. I can't remember what you're.
Well, if you do ice, you can always change your mind later. If you do dry land, you can't change your mind later.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? That we can turn off the new system will allow us to turn off the small ice, and you can turn it to dry land anytime if you want.
Correct.
So that's why I'm kind of stuck with, I'm kind of on option one. If we go beyond that, curling's done in this town for 3 years. If we go into these other these other things. So you have to understand curling is not a growing sport. It's kind of held its own for the last 20 years, but even the current facility can easily handle 500 members. Even if you increased your membership by 30%, you can still do it in the existing facility. So, you know, the reason why I wanted to change why we got on it a little bit was because there was tournaments that would not come. Like we've had provincial playdowns, seniors, men's, women's, these provincial playdowns that can play on that ice. The problem is that sheet 1 got so bad that, if you know curling, when you're good curlers, those of us that are just there to have a bunch of drinks and chuck some rocks, we don't really care. But if you're a good curler, you don't want to be chucking negative ice the whole time, right? And that's why that sheet 1 was so bad. And John could never keep that ice level. So that's what the agreement was to get it back. So at least that sheet can be level, and they can, and some of these play downs and stuff will return because they left because it was just, they couldn't use that sheet of ice. So that's kind of where we're at. I'll go back to, I think, Jamie and then Brenda.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Just quickly, listening to all the arguments and your points, I would support an option 1 if it came before me in a council meeting. Thank you.
Brenda?
I wonder if we could just have a quick look at the comparison numbers again, Riley, regarding 1 and I believe 2. I'm agreeing with what the rest are saying, in that if we installed the ice and then later changed our mind and utilized it in other ways, what's the cost difference between the 2, as well as the time to complete the project?
Sure. Hold on a sec. I can't. Sharing's been taken away. Oh, Jody.
I can jump in, Riley. I've got the numbers here. It's approximately about a $200,000 difference, the cost comparison between a purely dryland facility to an ice facility. And the time frame for construction is between 7 and 13 months, hopefully on the shorter side, and going from there. So there's the numbers there, about $250,000. Does that answer your question, Councillor Walsh?
Yes, thank you, Chris.
Back to Jamie.
Quick question, Riley, and I'm sure this is the case, but if let's say we decided to put in curling in a small rink, and then at later date we decide to put in dry land, I'm guessing that the cooling systems can be isolated so that you can cool one and not the other.
There's limits on what we can do. Right now, we can only run them both or neither. The intent is that when all the piping's redone, we would valve it so we could do both or curling only, but you wouldn't be able to do leisure only because of existing piping. To be able to do either or and have the option to have leisure but no curling requires quite a bit of more piping. So the intent was curling only or both.
Okay, thank you.
So that's the thing. It's kind of solves that dry land thing, right? If it's ever needed in the future, we can shut that small ice surface off, and you got your concrete slab of dry land. Do whatever you want. Kelly,
Is that something that? Thank you, Mayor. Is that something that you could retrofit the curling area in the off season too, to use for other training purposes?
use for shuffleboard right now
Is it?
in the summertime.
That's it?
Yeah, well, it takes up the whole thing, right? So once they get it set up, it's there, and they pay a lease on it too. I think it's back to the curling club, or do they pay it to the town now? Doesn't matter.
The town now.
Yeah, shuffleboard uses it all summer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, go ahead, Chris.
Mayor Snodgrass, I just want to correct something that I said. We can use MSI for this, and we have a successful grant application to match the funding that's remaining for using MSI. So we can use MSI, lots of acronyms, Municipal Sustainability Initiative, and MSP, Municipal Stimulus Program. We can use those two funding streams to make that work. So
if it's option one, it's fully funded between the COVID infrastructure grant and MSI grants.
That's correct.
Nothing out of direct town. Well, MSI is normal town of High River money. It's not really a grant, like a special grant for it, but yeah, we can use it. It's not a hit to the taxpayer. It's not a tax increase or anything that's needed to get this thing done. The money's there.
That's
Michael.
correct.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. Along with some of the other councillors and yourself, option one gets us back in there soonest, and I think mitigates the loss of more people that are involved in the curling club. And to Chris's addition of MSI into there, I'll throw this out to everybody that maybe we find a little bit more money and we can put a little bit of lipstick on some of this stuff that's there, i.e. the lounge. If we can fix the ice surface, then we can fix up the facility a little bit, and then it's just more user friendly in the long run, and get those ramps in there like Riley was talking about for accessibility. So just a thought, if we got MSI money too, then maybe we can do a little bit more than just replacing the functional part of the ice surfaces. Thanks.
Dr. Jamie.
I think I'm having a hard time calling Craig Mayor, but Mayor Craig. Anyways, Riley, one other question to follow up with what Michael just said is, one question I remember years ago was, if we were to take those dressing rooms in the small ice surface, is there room behind it towards the bleachers? And is there room to connect them or anything like that? Is there any thought been put into that?
Sorry, Jamie, I'm having problems visualizing what that would look like, because we don't have all the space between the small walkway and the bleachers is used. Like, we'd have to push into the bleacher space, or we'd have to connect dressing rooms. I know we have a structural wall in there too, because I'm pretty sure trusses on large arena go east-west. So that would be a structural wall. I know it's a firewall for sure that would be cutting through. So there could be some challenges with regards to trying to push to the east.
Yeah, and that might be the case. I just remember it getting brought up one time. Somebody said, oh, there's a storage room behind some of the small rooms and all this stuff. And I just wanted to throw that into the mix just to see if it's one of those lipstick items that we could do. So.
Okay, so Chris, Riley, council, tell me if I'm completely misreading this, but it's sounding like we should be directing administration to focus on option one. Put your hand up or say something if you've got something else, but I think we're headed for option one to get that.
Council's current direction is option one. So you actually have to change the direction, or we'll continue on.
Continue on. Correct, Chris?
That's correct.
With 100% clear?
100% clear. Option one, continue on to get this built as fast as possible.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on. Chris, rec board and policing. Thanks very much, Riley. Boatload. Thanks, Nancy.
So this is follow up from the organizational meeting that was brought up about both the policing committee not having appointees as the rec board. And what we're seeking here is to have direction from committee of the whole and the rest of council to formally investigate options and bring back those options for the January 10th COW meeting and come back with different structures. There have been different structures from the rec board's process investigated previously. That has never been reported back to council. We want to finalize that work and bring forward a final report on what that structure should look like, or if there should even be any structure. That's always an option of council as well, not to have any structure whatsoever. And we'd be targeting for January 10th. Same with the policing committee. The policing committee is being primarily focused on policing under the RCMP. Where we're trying to focus our attention on is streamlining the process, reducing the number of committees and the commitment of staff to be answering to all these committees, and encompassing and amalgamating committees together like protective services, policing, and fire services, all under a protective services framework if that's necessary. And we can bring forward those recommendations for January 10th. And so we're looking for that formal direction coming from the committee of the whole to prepare those and to come back and report for January 10th. Thank you.
You said coming back first meeting in January? Sorry, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Jamie Kinghorn.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. That's a pretty quick turnaround there, Chris. That's a short time frame, especially when you got Christmas and everything in there. But having sat on the rec board for a number of years, there was always some confusion in that the title was Parks and Rec Board. If you're going to look at this, I would suggest that we'd separate those two. Parks is significantly different than rec. And it seemed to be at the time when I was on it, it would be sort of dominated by a particular sport, depending on what the hot issue was of the year kind of thing, and who wanted to step up and volunteer. So previous employer had talked about a bit of a sports council. I really like that idea, and I've talked to a number of people in sporting, and they would concur, and maybe you'd have a representative, something like somebody from hockey, somebody from lacrosse, somebody from baseball, whatever it might be. But I would really like administration to consider something like that. Of course, I'd be looking to our new director, Nancy, to make suggestion on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. And it all depends. What is the real purpose, right? And we need to have that conversation and what the history is behind it. If it is that sporting council kind of concept to provide feedback on programs, ice times, usage, fees, those types of things, then that is an advisory kind of board that would be created through a sports council. But there's multiple different options, and we'd like to present those back to you.
No further questions. We'll see you in January. Okay. Question and answer. So this is just wide open. Anything you want, anything you got, raise your hand and get at it. If there's nothing, we're going to adjourn this and move straight into the special meeting. So back to Councillor Kinghorn. Always got something to mess up in the program.
Somebody has to step in after Councillor Masterman. I received a phone call from a business owner this morning, and they were talking about what our purchasing practices are from the town. And if I recall, some time ago, he had talked about doing some sort of a purchasing policy, putting something together where we wouldn't limit our quotations to businesses within town, but we certainly would make sure that any business that was able to provide a service would be included on any sort of inquiry or quote. I don't know if we've made any headway on that policy, but I look to Chris. Have you done any work on it? Have we had time to do anything with it?
Yes, Councillor Kinghorn, through the mayor to you. We are working on a revised purchasing policy coming forward. Our current practices has different thresholds within that requires either 3 quotes if it's under a certain threshold, a formal tendering process or RFP process that has a formal advertised process that's publicly available. And so we do follow that quite closely. It is always a sticky, it's always difficult preferring local contractors through an open, transparent process. That's always a very difficult process, especially with the trade agreements on those things above $75,000 from that perspective. But we do our best to try and get pricing from local contractors when it's below those thresholds and when we are only seeking through prices. But we will have an updated purchasing policy as part of a policy package in early January sometime, and open for the conversation at that point.
So Chris, just to follow up, has that threshold been established on what the threshold is?
There's thresholds of $5,000. You're going to test my memory, Councillor Kinghorn, which is different. There's different thresholds for different members, but certainly there's thresholds of $5,000 or less to get three prices from. All purchasing requires some degree of three pricing or three quotes to be submitted to be competitive and to go with our wording in our policies to go with the lowest. And so we want to change that to also reflect some other criteria that is not necessarily the lowest, but is the best.
Sure, certainly. I've never been a supporter of always pick the lowest bidder, but I just wanted to ask that question because this particular business wants to get on the list, so to speak, to get a call when some of their work is needed. Thank you.
Councillor Barton.
Thanks, Councillor Mayor.
I got it all.
Yeah. Actually, it was funny. Just last week when I was heading off early to work, and I was heading north, I just happened to notice in the new Costco Walmart location that's being constructed in High River, there's what are we calling that? That's flood mitigation repair, I guess it is. There was Riley, you probably already know about this, all the dirt that was all across the road, and I guess I've seen that a couple times. I saw it on Rant and Rave again on the weekend, but anyways, I'm just wondering what our policy is going forward with that, because I know I'm in construction and we definitely can't do that on job sites that I'm on anyway. So
specific on that one, I'm not sure. There's usually a contractual requirement that's written right in. Yeah, it's been an issue, and I know Tom's been dealing with them on it, but what specifically, I haven't gotten into the details. I can follow up though and make sure they're on it.
thanks.
I know I've noticed them out a couple times scraping and cleaning, but they're not the best of work.
Yeah, exactly. So
They need a broom or something, not just that bobcat.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Or there's actually a policy on lots of job sites, especially in downtown Calgary, where you have to have your trucks come out and there's actually a wash prior to on the road. So
Yeah, not on this contract. I know that does exist for some city stuff. We typically don't do that though.
right, yeah, but they're working in mud, so it might not be a bad idea to push them on that.
Councillor Killick-Smith.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Question about the cancellation of the parade and regards to sort of what is our role with the promotion of it, or any of the, like, I've had a couple people suggest to me that that's a negative one for the town. Of course, you know, the committee is the one that has to defer to what they think is best for AHS, but is there any kind of monetary commitment that we might have there, and what is our expected way forward, I guess, is kind of my question about it, because it's a fairly significant event to have happened in the downtown area, and certainly there's some negative spinoffs for all of the businesses associated with it as well. So just curious as to where that lands for us and how we should respond to some of the questions that we're going to be getting, and if there's a fiduciary commitment on our part. I'm kind of curious.
There is money that comes through the town that supports both of the parades, the Little Britches and the Santa Claus Parade. As far as the organizing and the decision as to whether it goes or not, that is not the town of High River that decides that. That is the volunteers that organize that event. And I've talked to both of them, with Ted and Hank, and they met with AHS, and with all the restrictions and all the things that AHS wanted to see coming through there, they decided to cancel it. It's a monster. It's a big one, and you can't compare it to the car show, because the car show was fully organized, was all there, everything was done, and you know, a few days before it was to go is when Kenny put the put the restrictions back in place after his summer program was done. Then he put the restrictions back in place. So that's why the car show went. The other thing is the car show, AHS was saying, a little bit different. They weren't going to step in on that one because it was so far down the organizing road. Canceling it would have been an absolute schmoz. But with that many people standing shoulder to shoulder, and they just stand there. That's what one of their concerns were, where with the car show, everybody's moving around and stuff. So they had less concern there. So, there's an impact. Yes, it sucks. Priority one is still the safety of the community, and the organizers decided that was the safest route to go with the current restrictions still in place. We're a long ways away from being out of this. So they made that decision. And I supported it 100% if that's the way they felt. I'm with them. So, but Town High River doesn't decide whether it goes or it doesn't.
Okay.
Does that answer the question, Kelly?
I think so.
Yeah. Brenda?
I just want to add something on the lighter side of things. A longtime client of mine was in and told me that her family's very sad that the Santa Claus parade has been canceled. And we said just the very same thing, that the town doesn't decide to do these. The volunteers have to feel comfortable putting these groups together as an organization. And she said, well, for all it matters, her son, who is 11, said, why don't they just have a car show again and they can just put the lights on the cars because they're allowed to have a car show, right? I hope that was.
Don't think the car show would be allowed to go again, but I get his point. Councillor Kinghorn.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Just to follow up on Councillor Smith's comments, this is the second year it's been canceled. We as a town give that group $30,000, 15 for the Little Britches and 15 for the Santa Claus parade. With it not going ahead, I understand they want to do these porch parades. Do we still want to commit that kind of money to this committee or to this group of people? And secondly, when we do and this is a bit of a bone for me because it's the fire department. And when we were looking at having the fire department for a 2-hour presence, we were told it was going to be extra budget money and all this sort of stuff, and it was going to be a huge cost and that kind of thing. Now we're talking about with a porch parade of them driving around town for, I believe it's 2 hours, 3 nights in a row, or 3 different nights. How are we going to manage that? Or is there a plan, or have you heard, Chris, what we want to do or what's going to happen? I don't want to be a negative Christmassy guy. I'm all about Christmas as much as the next person. And I love the parade, and I actually won the bid to spend an hour with Santa Claus before Christmas, so I'm excited about that. And if any of you want to join, well, I got kids to take, never mind. Thanks.
Yeah, Councillor Kinghorn, I haven't heard exactly what the fire department plans to do. I know last year we sent out fire trucks, and some of it was done with volunteer work from our fire crews volunteering some of their time to go out and drive around, and it was not on 3 consecutive nights either. It was a little bit more spread out. So that might be a little bit of a challenge, but I haven't had a chance to talk to Cody. The other thing too, that $30,000, I wanted to let everybody know too, it's not just to the 2 parades, it also goes to lighting up George Lane Park. So it is part of that lighting up aspect of things at George Lane Park, and it does go to find new lights that go in there and new exhibits, which they did make an investment last year in several new exhibits within George Lane Park. And you can easily talk to Tom or Hank and Ted, and they'll give you a full-on breakdown of what they do and how they allocate those funds associated with the funding that we give for those parades. So I know they're going to be super disappointed for the second year in a row not having a full-on parade, and any parades actually. And I think it's worth the conversation with them to just continue giving them the support, because they're feeling a little bit disheartened, right? So. And it's out of their control.
Michael.
Thanks, Mayor. Just for clarity on the town and the money that goes to parades, light up the park. It comes through CVAC, just for our newest additions. So
This stuff
CVAC gets a
doesn't go-
pot of money that we not. What's
These
that?
ones don't. These ones don't, Michael. Remember, we removed them out. They were funded through
Oh, that's
CVAC, and then we
right.
pulled them out because it was just going to be a standard thing that they didn't need to
Right,
apply.
that's the only standalone thing. Hey, okay, we'll rewind that. Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah, and remember, last year they did come back and requested that they were allowed to use their funds to increase the lights in the
light,
park.
yeah, light up the park.
So
yeah,
if they do that this year, I don't know. That'll be a request that they can bring back to use that money for the lights instead of the parade. So we'll see. I don't know. That park's getting damn full with what they've got there right now. So they're doing great. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Is it possible to reallocate some of these designated funds in a way that supports what Ted and I can't remember the other person's name, but this whole project, the light up George Lane, the parade, can we support the marketing of that, the advertisement a little bit via social media, maybe like somehow be more visibly present to support what they are doing? Because so many times people get, oh, they canceled the parade and that's it. Then they don't participate in any other way. Can we enhance the participation of the town at all is my question.
Yeah, the comms department does promote the George Lane Park and stuff because that's our property. So the comms is always putting that out. Comms is a tough one because lots of people don't pay attention until after the fact, right? And then they say, why didn't you tell me? Well, it was all over the crier. It was all over Facebook. It was all over Twitter. It was all over Instagram. It was all over everything. Yeah, it trust me, you will learn what a beast comms is and trying to meet the needs of everybody. It's yeah, as a business owner, I'm sure you can understand, Brenda. So but yeah, we currently do that. But as far as any, using the money to do all that, well, all those resources exist within the town. So we got a whole department right underneath me here, so that can help promote those things. And it's all of our Facebook pages, every councillor and the mayor, we all have Facebook pages that we can pump this stuff out on. We've all got our followers, and we can help it out. So when you see it on Facebook and stuff, just share it, forward it, all these kinds of things, right? It's a big deal. But the big thing is, when you see Ted and Hank, and I went and talked to them both there on, what's today, Monday, Friday, went down to the park when they were putting the lights up and thanked them for everything you do. They need some kudos for what they're doing. There's some pretty ignorant people that showed up on Facebook there commenting about the cancellation of the parades, and it's an embarrassment. But I'd like to say, they're in every single community. When you do something they don't like, they show up, right? So, yeah. But are any of them on the volunteer list prior to this? No, they're not. So yeah. It's pretty frustrating when it gets on rant and rave and everything else, and everybody just starts freaking out. But Ted and Hank, especially Ted, he's the reason why the Santa Claus parade exists. Without him, well, you can dream that somebody else would pick it up, but they also have absolutely no idea how much effort goes into that Santa Claus parade. They start planning that thing like in July. That's how long it takes to put that parade together. And then Hank on the Little Britches end, same thing. It takes months of preparation to put these things together. It's not just phoning a bunch of your buddies to tell them to bring their stuff in and dress up a car and drive around and wave at everybody and thinking everybody's going to show up. It's an enormous amount, and Ted and Hank both need a pat on the back for being stuck and having to make a decision like they did. But without them, it won't exist. So,
and that was kind of where I was going. That supporting them as they're getting beaten down. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, no, 100%. I get it, Brenda. Like they do need the support, because more than enough that we'll beat them down over it. But Will they put their hand up? Well, let's see. I get bitter. Okay, no more questions. We'll call the meeting adjourned at 1:54. We'll see you in 6 minutes.